Red, orange, green, and brown, fall colors decorate the streets. Deflated ghosts gaze lazily into the sky from the ground. Greetings and welcome into the Pawtuxet General. I am your host, Jess. Each week we try to talk about local folklore, history pertinent to Rhode Island and Pawtuxet Village in particular. We are not only a podcast, but also a local pop-up general store full of local goods. Often, the recipes used in the show appear on our shelves. For information on what we are carrying each week, you can click on the Pawtuxet General Store link in our show notes, or follow us on Nextdoor or Facebook, where we post every week what we are doing and serving. But this week, we are looking a little deeper into Edgar Allan Poe's relationship with Rhode Island, a drink in honor of the library in which he had meetings with his doomed love, Sarah Helen Whitman, and a chicken dish to make you think it's all Greek and love and dinner, Athenian chicken. And then I'll be reading The Sphinx by Edgar Allan Poe. But first, I must thank our Patreon subscribers. These fresh olive and fish with wine for a main dish with a mezza to start eating sort of folk are the fabulous Greek food aficionados that fill the tables under the tents of the festival that is the Pawtuxet General, without whom it would be me in a chair, sighing. So thank you. If you would like to be one of these feta fetishists, a small donation at patreon.com or by following the link in the show notes would make all the difference. But until then, let's dive into the unbelievable Athenian chicken. This upcoming Saturday, November 11th, the Church of the Annunciation in Cranston, Rhode Island is holding their holiday bazaar, and I thought in appreciation for the very friendly folk over there, I might use one of their recipes from The Joy of Greek Cooking, which you can purchase in their bookstore anytime. And I suggest you do, because not only is this book super full of great recipes, but also some of the proceeds go to maintain the Parthenon. They gave me permission to use this recipe, so let's try Athenian chicken. This recipe uses boneless chicken breasts. We marinate them, then stuff them with a feta stuffing, and then bake wrapped in phyllo dough. This recipe calls for boneless chicken breasts. We marinate them, then stuff them with a feta stuffing, then bake wrapped in phyllo dough. When using phyllo dough, the thicker the sheets, the fewer you will get. I suggest using thick sheets for this recipe. Also, if you buy your phyllo dough frozen, which you probably will, defrost it in the refrigerator overnight, making sure it remains sealed. Then put on a countertop to come up to room temperature, while still remaining sealed, because once you open it, the dough will start to dry out immediately. For the marinated chicken, you will need 4 chicken breasts, boned, halved, and pounded, 1 cup of white wine, 1/2 cup olive oil, 3 cloves of garlic chopped, bay leaves to taste, oregano to taste, and salt and pepper to taste. Marinate and refrigerate the preceding overnight. Then for the filling, you will need 1 pound feta cheese crumbled, 1 egg, salt and pepper to taste, 2 tablespoons grated cheese, and 1/4 cup of white wine. Mix those preceding ingredients together. Then you will need 16 leaves Apollo phyllo dough and 1/2 pound of butter melted. Place the marinated chicken breast flat on a plate. Put 2 generous tablespoons of the cheese mixture on it and roll it up. Set aside until all the chicken breasts have been used. Take 2 strudel leaves, butter each and place one on the other. Fold the bottom up about 2 inches and put 1 rolled chicken breast on this apron. Fold both sides in and roll up. Place rolls on a buttered baking pan and brush the tops with butter. Bake in a moderate 325 to 375 degree oven for 1 hour. At this point, they should be lightly golden. Serve this with a Greek salad and perhaps rice pilaf, and you have a chicken showstopper. Enjoy! The Providence Athenaeum Martini. To go with your scrumptious Athenian chicken, and while you listen to The Sphinx by Edgar Allan Poe, I made this drink in honor of the dish and the romance of Poe and Sarah Helen Whitman. They often whiled away the time in the Providence Athenaeum, as reported in episode 70, and if you are interested in the whole story, please check it out. But before I share my new cocktail, let's clear up a few stories that have been spread around by would-be historians about Edgar and Providence. And my documentation comes from the Athenaeum itself. It is well established that the anonymously submitted poem Ulalume, to which Poe signed his name in the Athenaeum itself, was indeed written by him and not an act of hubris to impress Sarah Helen Whitman, although it did. Also, it is well accepted that there are numerous reports of Sarah's relatives taking Edgar out to drink before the wedding, thus ensuring its cancellation. Not only that, but as stated in episode 70, his death is suspicious due to election schemes that were prevalent during the time in which unscrupulous parties would find men down on their luck and give them liquor to encourage them to be dragged around to different boroughs in different clothes to vote multiple times. This is why Poe was found in strange clothes that didn't fit him. The evidence just doesn't support the romantic tale of death by a broken heart, although perhaps that was why he was so easily fooled. I guess we'll never know. But I can raise a glass to him, Sarah Helen Whitman, and to the Providence Library that brought them together. For this martini, you will need 1 ounce of ouzo of your choice, 2 ounces cucumber vodka of your choice, 1 ounce simple syrup, 1/2 ounce lime juice, fresh mint and cucumber, a cube of feta, and a slice of cucumber for garnish. Muddle the cucumber and the mint in the shaker, then add the simple syrup, fresh lime juice, cucumber vodka, and ouzo, and then add the ice. Give it a really good shake, and double strain into a really cold martini glass, and garnish with a round of cucumber and a cube of feta. Next full moon, check out Sarah Helen Whitman's house on Benefit Street at midnight. Perhaps you'll find her tending her roses. Or just stay in and find love for yourself in your Providence Athenaeum Martini. This just in. The most exciting time of the year is upon us at the Edgewood Congregational Church, the annual Holiday Bazaar. November 18th, 2023 from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. This year is bigger than ever. Lydia's Closet, the thrift store, has been collecting all sorts of really useful items, stunning jewelry, clothing, and that's just them. We are filled to the brim with vendors. Food vendors you may recognize from the farmer's market. The Pawtuxet General itself will be chock full of pies to sell. The bazaar will have games for the kids and pinball from Electromagnetic Pinball Museum and Restoration. Come join us November 18th, 2023 from 9 a.m. till 2 p.m. I'll meet you there. I want to tell you about my friend Mike and his Electromagnetic Pinball Museum and Restoration Arcade. It's an all-inclusive place to relax and share anything related to modern pinball, EM pinball, and arcade games. A group of pinball and arcade fans with an addiction to games of all kinds and Lego too. $10 gets you free play on pinball and arcade games all day. You can find them at 881 Main Street, Pawtucket, Rhode Island, or online at www.electromagneticpinballmuseum.com. The Sphinx by Edgar Allan Poe. During the dread reign of cholera in New York, I had accepted the invitation of a relative to spend a fortnight with him in the retirement of his cottage on the banks of the Hudson. We had here around us all the ordinary means of summer amusement, and what with rambling in the woods, sketching, boating, fishing, bathing, music, and books, we should have passed the time pleasantly enough, but for the fearful intelligence that reached us every morning from the populous city. Not a day elapsed which did not bring us news of the decease of some acquaintance. And as the fatality increased, we learned to expect daily the loss of some friend. At length we trembled at the approach of every messenger. The very air from the south seemed to us redolent with death. That palsying thought, indeed, took entire possession of my soul. I could neither speak, think, nor dream of anything else. My host was of a less excitable temperament, and although greatly depressed in spirits, exerted himself to sustain my own. His richly philosophical intellect was not at any time affected by the unrealities. To the substances of terror he was sufficiently alive, but of its shadows he had no apprehension. His endeavors to arouse me from the condition of abnormal gloom into which I had fallen were frustrated in great measure by certain volumes which I had found in his library. These were of a character to force into germination whatever seeds of hereditary superstition lay latent in my bosom. I had been reading these books without his knowledge, and thus he was often at a loss to account for the forcible impressions which had made upon my fancy. A favorite topic with me was the popular belief in omens, a belief which, at this one epoch in my life, I was seriously disposed to defend. On this subject we had long and animated discussions, he maintaining the utter groundlessness of faith in such matters, I contending that a popular sentiment arising with absolute spontaneity, that is to say, without apparent traces of suggestion, had in itself the unmistakable elements of truth, and was entitled to as much respect as that institution which the idiosyncrasy of the individual man of genus. The fact is that soon after my arrival at the cottage there had occurred to myself an incident so entirely inexplicable, and which had in it so much of the portentous character, that I might well have been excused for regarding it as an omen. It appalled and at the same time so confounded and bewildered me that many days elapsed before I could make up my mind to communicate the circumstances to my friend. Near the close of an exceedingly warm day, I was sitting, book in hand, at an open window, commanding, through a long vista of river banks, a view of a distant hill, the face of which, nearest my position, had been denuded by what is termed a landslide of the principal portion of its trees. My thoughts had been long in wandering from the volume upon me to the gloom and desolation of the neighboring city. Uplifting my eyes from the page, they fell upon the naked face of the hill, and upon an object, upon some living monster of hideous conformation, which very rapidly made its way from the summit to the bottom, disappearing finally in the dense forest below. As this creature first came in sight, I doubted my own sanity, or at least the evidence of my own eyes, and many minutes passed before I succeeded in convincing myself that I was neither mad nor in a dream. Yet when I described the monster, which I distinctly saw and calmly surveyed through the whole period of its progress, my readers, I fear, will feel more difficulty in being convinced of these points than even I did myself. Estimating the size of the creature by comparison with the diameter of the large trees which it had passed, the few giants of the forest which had escaped the fury of the landslide, I concluded that it had to be far larger than any ship of the line in existence. I say ship of the line because the shape of the monster suggested the idea. The hull of one of the 74 might convey a very tolerable conception of the general outline. The mouth of the animal was situated at the extremity of a proboscis, some 60 or 70 feet in length, and about as thick as the body of an ordinary elephant. Near the root of its trunk was an immense quantity of shaggy black hair, more than could have been supplied by coats of a score of buffaloes, and projecting from this hair downwardly and laterally sprang two gleaming tusks, not unlike those of a wild boar, but infinitely greater dimensions. Extending forward and parallel with the proboscis, and on each side of it, was a gigantic staff, 30 or 40 feet in length, formed seemingly of pure crystal and in shape of perfect prism. It reflected in the most gorgeous manner the rays of the declining sun. The trunk was fashioned like a wedge with the apex to the earth. From it there outspread 2 pairs of wings, each wing nearly 100 yards in length, one pair being placed above the other, and all thickly covered with metal scales, each scale apparently some 10 or 12 feet in diameter. I observed that the upper and lower tiers of the wings were connected by a strong chain breast. But the chief peculiarity of this horrible thing was the representation of a death's head, which covered nearly the whole surface of its breast, and which was as accurately traced in glaring white upon the dark round of its body as if it had been there carefully designed by an artist. While I regarded the terrific animal, and more especially the appearance on its breast, with a feeling of horror and awe, with a sentiment of forthcoming evil, which I found it impossible to quell by any effort of the reason, I perceived the huge jaws at the extremity of the proboscis suddenly expand themselves. From them there proceeded a sound so loud and so expansive of woe that it struck upon my nerves like a knell, and as the monster disappeared at the foot of the hill, I fell at once, fainting, to the floor. Upon recovering, my first impulse, of course, was to inform my friend of what I had seen and heard, and I can scarcely explain what feeling of repugnance in which, in the end, operated to prevent me. At length, one evening, some 3 or 4 days after the occurrence, we were sitting together in the room in which I had seen the apparition, I occupying the same seat at the same window, and he lounging on a sofa near at hand. The association of the place and time impelled me to give him an account of the phenomenon. He heard me to the end, at first laughed heartily, and then lapsed into an excessive grave demeanor, as if my insanity was a thing beyond suspicion. At this instant I again had the distinct view of this monster, to which, in a shout of absolute terror, I now directed his attention. He looked eagerly, but maintained that he saw nothing, although I designated minutely the course of the creature as it made its way down the naked face of the hill. I was now immeasurably alarmed, for I considered the vision either as an omen of my death, or worse, as the forerunner of an attack of mania. I threw myself passionately back in the chair, and for some moments buried my face in my hands. When I uncovered my eyes, the apparition was no longer present. My host, however, had in some degree resumed the calmness of his demeanor, and questioned me very rigorously in respect to the confirmation of the visionary creature. When I had fully satisfied him on the head, he sighed deeply, as if relieved in some intolerable burden, and went on to talk, with what I thought was a cruel calmness, of various points of speculative philosophy, which had hitherto formed subject of discussion between us. I remember his insisting, very especially, amongst other things, upon the idea that the principle of source of error in all human investigations lay in the liability of understanding to underrate or to overvalue the importance of an object, through mere misadmeasurement of its propinquity. To estimate properly, for example, he said, the influence to be exercised on mankind at large by or through diffusion of democracy, the distance of the epoch at which the diffusion may possibly be accomplished, should not fail to form an item in the estimate. Yet can you tell me one writer on the subject of government who has ever thought this particular branch of the subject worthy of discussion at all? He here paused for a moment, stepped to the bookcase, and brought forth one of the ordinary synopses of natural history. Requesting me to then exchange seats with him, that he may better distinguish the fine point of the volume, he took my armchair at the window, and opening the book, resumed his discourse very much in the same tone as before. "But for your exceeding minuteness," he said, "in describing the monster, I might never have had it in my power to demonstrate to you what it was. In the first place, let me read to you a schoolboy account of the genus Sphinx, of the family Crepuscularia, of the order Lepidoptera, of the class Insecta, or insects. The account runs thus. 4 membranous wings covered with little colored scales of metallic appearance, mouth forming a rolled proboscis, produced by the elongation of the jaws, upon the sides of which are found the rudiments of mandibles and downy palpi. The inferior wings retained to the superior by a stiff hair, antennae in the form of an elongated club, prismatic. Abdomen pointed, the death's head sphinx had occasioned such terror among the vulgar, at times, by the melancholy kind of cry in which it utters, and the insignia of the death which it wears upon its corslet. Here he closed the book and leaned forward on the chair, placing himself accurately in the position I had occupied at the moment of beholding the monster. "Ah, here it is," he presently exclaimed. "It is reascending the face of the hill, and a very remarkable-looking creature I admit it to be. Still, it is no means as large or so distant as you imagined it. For the fact is that, as it wriggles its way up the thread which some spider has wrought along the window sash, that I find it to be about 1/16 of an inch as its extreme length, and also about a 1/16 of an inch distant from the pupil of my eye." Thank you once again for joining us today at the Pawtuxet General. If you would like to reach out with a local ghost story, questions about a recipe, our email is jess@pawtuxetgeneral.com. Please reach out. We can't wait to hear from you, and we'll get back to you as soon as possible. But until then, I'll meet you right back here next time at the Pawtuxet General. A Something for Posterity production, pre-recorded in Pawtuxet.